Welcome to our deep dive into Reconstruction.
Great to be here.
Yeah, we're going to be unpacking this interview with historian Dr. Ashley Lawrence Sanders, and she really sheds some light on this often overlooked period and
Yeah,
how its misrepresentation has really shaped our understanding of race and equality in America even today.
absolutely.
It's funny, growing up, I always pictured Reconstruction as this kind of
Yeah,
chaotic period of northern carpetbaggers exploiting the South.
right.
But Dr. Sanders paints a very different picture.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think a lot of us get a very simplified, maybe even romanticized version of Reconstruction.
Right.
But to really grasp its significance, I
Yeah.
think we have to go back to that post-Civil War South, and specifically 1877.
Okay.
So just imagine this: Black communities are flourishing. They're building businesses, schools, churches. You have this wave of Black political participation sweeping the South.
Yeah.
There's a real sense of hope and progress, but then everything changes when federal troops withdraw.
Why was that withdrawal such a big deal?
Right.
It seems like a simple policy shift,
Yeah.
but Dr. Sanders calls it a turning point.
Yeah, the withdrawal of federal troops wasn't just a policy shift.
Right.
It really represented this waning national commitment to racial equality. It was a turning point where the possibility of a more just South
Right.
began to slip away.
Yeah.
And there were several factors that culminated in this decision.
Okay.
One of the big ones was the incredibly messy and controversial election of 1876,
Oh, yeah.
which led to the Compromise of 1877.
Right.
And essentially, the North made a deal sacrificing the protection of Black Southerners for political gain.
Wow. So the stage is set. Federal troops are gone.
Right.
There's this power vacuum in the South.
Absolutely.
This is where this lost cause narrative comes in, right?
Exactly.
I've heard that term,
hmm
but never fully understood what it meant.
Well, the lost cause is really a carefully constructed narrative
Yeah.
that distorts the true nature of the Civil War and Reconstruction. It downplays slavery's brutality,
Right.
romanticizes the Confederacy,
Okay.
and portrays Reconstruction as this period of Northern tyranny.
Wait, so they're basically saying that the South was noble,
Yeah,
slavery wasn't that bad,
Mm.
and Reconstruction was the real injustice?
right.
It's almost like they flipped the script entirely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was incredibly effective
Wow.
because by controlling the narrative,
Right.
those who wanted to maintain the old power structures
Yeah.
could shape public perception for generations to come.
That's incredible.
Think about it. Monuments,
Oh, well.
textbooks, even family stories
Oh, wow.
all played a role in solidifying this distorted version of history.
So it wasn't just about rewriting history books. It was about
Right.
influencing the very way people understood their past, their
Exactly.
identity.
Absolutely.
Dr. Sanders mentions groups like the Sons and Daughters of the Confederacy.
Yeah.
What role did they play in all of this?
Well, groups like the Sons and Daughters of the Confederacy were really instrumental
Okay.
in propagating the lost cause mythology.
Mm.
And, they weren't just preserving history, they were actively shaping it.
Yeah.
They erected monuments glorifying Confederate figures,
Wow.
published textbooks that presented this sanitized view of the South, and organized events that celebrated this, lost cause ideology.
It's kind of disturbing to think that these organizations had
Yeah.
so much influence over how history was presented.
It is disturbing.
And it wasn't just about words, right?
Mhm.
There was a lot of violence
Yeah.
associated with this period too.
Absolutely.
I immediately think of groups like the Ku Klux Klan.
Well, while the KKK is infamous for its role in terrorizing Black communities,
Right.
other groups like the Red Shirts were actually more politically influential and effective
Really?
in dismantling Reconstruction. They were often connected to powerful individuals and operated with a degree of impunity.
Interesting. I always assumed the KKK was like the primary force of white terror during this era.
Right.
But if these other groups were so powerful,
Yeah.
why don't we hear as much about them?
Well, that goes back to the power of narrative control.
Okay.
The Red Shirts, for example, often operated very openly,
Right.
using intimidation and violence to suppress Black voting and political participation.
Wow.
But their actions were often downplayed or justified within this lost cause narrative.
Oh, so they were able to operate in the shadows.
In a way.
Their actions hidden behind this veil of respectability.
Sure.
Dr. Sanders also discusses the Dunning School.
Right.
What was their role in shaping the narrative of Reconstruction?
Well, the Dunning School led by William Archibald Dunning,
Okay.
was a group of historians who really provided intellectual legitimacy to the lost cause.
Wow.
They argued that Reconstruction failed because Black people were inherently incapable of self-governance.
I'm baffled that such a flawed and biased theory
Yeah.
could gain traction within academic circles.
Right.
How did the Dunning School's ideas spread so widely?
Yeah.
And what was the lasting impact of their work?
Well, the Dunning School's influence was pervasive and long-lasting. Their work was published in prestigious academic journals,
Right.
cited in countless textbooks,
Yeah.
and even shaped public policy decisions
Wow.
related to race and civil rights.
So it created this like aura of academic respectability
Yeah.
around the lost cause, making it harder to challenge and discredit.
Absolutely.
But surely there were people who challenged these distortions.
Absolutely. While the Dunning School held sway for decades,
Right.
Black communities never accepted this warped version of history. They kept the truth alive through oral histories, family stories,
Yeah.
and community organizations.
Wow.
Think of it as a counter-narrative passed down through generations that preserved the memory of Reconstruction's promise and the struggles Black people faced.
It's a testament to their strength and resilience, isn't it?
Absolutely.
To hold on to their truth,
Yeah,
even when the dominant narrative tried to erase it.
exactly.
Dr. Sanders mentions a couple of names, Carter G. Woodson
Right.
and W.E.B. Du Bois.
Mm-hmm.
What were their specific arguments against the lost cause?
Well, both Woodson and Du Bois were intellectual giants
Yeah.
who dedicated their lives to dismantling the lost cause mythology
Okay.
and highlighting the achievements and struggles of Black people
Right.
throughout American history.
Yeah.
Woodson, for example, founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History
Wow.
and established Negro History Week,
Okay.
which later evolved into Black History Month.
Right, right.
He argued that Black history was integral to American history and needed to be studied and celebrated.
That makes so much sense. If you're only telling one side of the story, you're missing out on
Exactly.
a huge part of the American experience.
Absolutely.
In Du Bois.
Well, Du Bois was a sociologist, historian, and activist
Oh,
who challenged the Dunning School's assumptions about Black inferiority head on.
okay.
In his groundbreaking book, Black Reconstruction, he meticulously documented the political, social, and economic achievements of Black people
Wow.
doing Reconstruction,
Okay.
highlighting their agency and challenging these prevailing narratives of Black incapacity.
Right.
He argued that Reconstruction was not a failure because of Black people, but because of white backlash and the failure of the federal government
Yeah.
to fully support Black equality.
It's amazing how these scholars challenge the dominant narrative,
Mm-hmm.
but it also makes you wonder if they were producing such groundbreaking work, why did the lost cause narrative
Right.
persist for so long?
That's a complex question,
Yeah.
but I think it speaks to the power of institutions
Yeah.
and the slow pace of societal change.
Right.
The lost cause had permeated so many aspects of American life,
Yeah.
education, politics, popular culture,
It's everywhere.
that it took decades of sustained activism, scholarship, and social movements to chip away at its foundations.
Wow.
And frankly, we're still grappling with its legacy today.
Dr. Sanders mentions a recent event in Charleston, the unveiling of a statue for Denmark Vesey.
Right.
She says his story is incredibly relevant
Yeah.
to understanding
I
Reconstruction.
think so too.
Who was Denmark Vesey, and
Yeah.
why does his story resonate so deeply?
Denmark Vesey was a free Black man in Charleston
Okay.
who planned this large-scale slave revolt in 1822.
Wow.
And while the revolt was ultimately suppressed,
Right.
Vesey's actions became this powerful symbol of Black resistance and this ongoing struggle for freedom.
Yeah.
And his story continued to inspire activists and organizers throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, demonstrating that the fight for Black liberation didn't begin with the Civil War
Right.
or end with Reconstruction.
Okay, I see the connection now. Even decades before the Civil War, there were Black people like Vesey actively fighting for their freedom.
Absolutely.
And that spirit of resistance continued through Reconstruction and beyond.
Yeah.
It seems like there's this direct line from the lost cause narrative
Right.
to the struggles of the civil rights movement.
You're exactly right. The lost cause laid the ideological groundwork for the Jim Crow era. By portraying Black people as incapable of self-governance
Right.
and justifying white supremacy.
Okay.
It created the conditions for segregation, disenfranchisement, and racial terror
Wow.
that defined the South for generations.
So the civil rights movement wasn't just about achieving equality in the present. It was
Okay.
about correcting the historical record.
Exactly.
About acknowledging the truth of Reconstruction and its legacy.
Absolutely. Civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh, right.
explicitly connected their struggle to the legacy of Reconstruction, arguing that the nation had this moral obligation
Right.
to fulfill the promises of equality and justice that had been denied to Black Americans for centuries.
Dr. Sanders keeps using the phrase hinge moment
Yeah.
to describe Reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
What does she mean by that?
Well, imagine a door on a hinge.
Okay.
Reconstruction was that hinge moment in American history
Right.
where the nation had a chance to swing open the door
Yeah.
to racial equality, to create a truly just and multiracial society.
Wow.
But instead, due to this confluence of factors,
Right.
the door swung shut
Oh.
and the nation took a different path,
Right.
one marked by continued racial inequality and injustice.
It's such a powerful analogy. If only things had gone differently.
It is a powerful analogy.
If only those in power had truly committed to racial justice. Yeah. It's heartbreaking to think about the missed opportunities.
It is, and it's a reminder that history isn't inevitable.
Right.
It's shaped by choices, by the actions and inactions of individuals and institutions.
This deep dive has been emotionally heavy, but it's also been incredibly enlightening.
I agree.
It's made me realize how much I didn't know about Reconstruction and how its misrepresentation has shaped our understanding of race and equality even today.
It's not easy confronting the darker chapters of our history.
No, it's not.
But it's absolutely necessary if we want to understand the present and build a better future.
I'm curious about how Dr. Sanders teaches this complex and emotionally charged history to her students. How does she make it relatable and meaningful for them?
She mentioned using primary sources, particularly a letter from a formerly enslaved man to his former master.
Wow.
And this letter articulates the needs and desires of Black people during this era, the desire for land education and the basic rights of citizenship.
Right.
And it humanizes the experience of Reconstruction,
Yeah.
allowing students to connect with the hopes, dreams, and struggles of individuals navigating this turbulent period.
That's such a powerful way to teach history.
It is.
It takes it out of the textbook and brings it to life. But it also makes you wonder, what would those individuals who lived through Reconstruction think of our society today?
It's a great question.
Would they be disappointed by how far we still have to go?
That's a thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
I think they would be both amazed by the progress we've made and disheartened by the persistence of racial inequality in so many areas of American life.
Right.
Remember, the fight for racial justice didn't end with Reconstruction or the Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing struggle that requires constant vigilance activism and a willingness to confront the systemic issues that perpetuate inequality.
It feels overwhelming sometimes.
It can.
But I also find hope in the work of historians like Dr. Sanders and activists who are dedicated to uncovering the truth and fighting for a more just society.
And remember, you don't have to be a historian or a full-time activist to make a difference.
Okay.
Start by having conversations with friends and family, educating yourself about the complexities of our history and supporting organizations working to dismantle systemic racism.
Right.
Every little bit counts.
That's a great point. We can all play a role in this ongoing struggle.
We can.
So where do we go from here? How do we take this newfound knowledge and turn it into meaningful action? It feels like we've only scratched the surface of this massive topic. Where do you even begin to unpack such a complex and multi-layered history?
You're right. It can feel daunting. But one thing that Dr. Sanders emphasizes is the importance of understanding how individual stories connect to these larger historical forces. And, think back to that letter she mentioned, the one from the formerly enslaved man to his former master.
Right.
It's a window into the very human desires for land, education, basic dignity that were really at the heart of Reconstruction.
It reminds me of something I heard recently about the Freedmen's Bureau.
Right.
They provided these essential services like education and healthcare to formerly enslaved people, but they were chronically underfunded and ultimately dismantled.
Yeah.
It feels like another missed opportunity.
The Freedmen's Bureau is a perfect example of how fragile progress can be.
Yeah.
It faced immense opposition from those who wanted to maintain the old power structures.
Right.
And ultimately, the federal government's commitment to racial equality wavered.
Right.
And this is where understanding the historical context is so important. The decisions made during Reconstruction, or the lack of decisions, continue to reverberate through our society today.
It makes you wonder what could have been if Reconstruction had truly succeeded.
Yeah.
Dr. Sanders called it a hinge moment, but it feels like the door to equality swung shut pretty quickly.
It did. And I think that's why it's so important to learn about the individuals and organizations who continued to fight for justice, even after Reconstruction ended. Think about Ida B. Wells and her fearless campaign against lynching.
Yeah.
Or the NAACP's legal battles against segregation.
Yeah.
Their work reminds us that the struggle for equality is a marathon, not a sprint.
This deep dive has been eye-opening, to say the least.
Yeah.
It's filled me with this mix of sadness, anger, and a strange sense of hope.
Right.
Sadness for the missed opportunities, anger at the injustices that were allowed to happen, and hope that by learning from the past, we can create a better future.
It's a complex emotional cocktail, but it's a necessary one.
It is.
We can't shy away from these difficult emotions because they fuel our commitment to change. And that's what Dr. Sanders leaves us with, this sense of urgency, a call to action.
So what can we as individuals actually do? It feels like such a massive problem. Where do you even start?
Start with education.
Okay.
Seek out books, documentaries, podcasts that offer diverse perspectives on Reconstruction and its legacy. Support organizations working to dismantle systemic racism.
Okay.
And most importantly, have those uncomfortable conversations with friends, family, and colleagues.
Right.
Challenge the myths and stereotypes that still permeate our society.
I'm reminded of that quote by Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice.
Powerful quote.
It's a reminder that progress is possible, but it requires constant effort, vigilance, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths.
And remember, you don't have to be a historian or an activist to make a difference.
Right.
Every act of education, every conversation, every effort to challenge injustice contributes to bending that arc toward justice.
This has been a powerful journey. Thank you for guiding us through this
pleasure.
Complex and often overlooked chapter of American history. I feel like I've learned so much. But I also realize how much more there is to learn.
The learning never ends. And that's the beauty of history. It's a constant process of discovery, reflection, and action.
For our listeners out there, I encourage you to continue this journey of discovery. Pick up Dr. Sanders' book.
It's a great book.
Visit your local historical society, or simply start a conversation with someone about what you've learned today. Remember, the more we understand our past, the better equipped we are to shape our future. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Reconstruction.